Okay, welcome everyone to Bridges of Belonging. This is episode number 28, and very much looking forward to this conversation today with the incredible Chief Lara Mussell Savage and Darrell Fox. I think this will be an incredible conversation and one that our world really needs right now. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional territories that I'm coming to you from today in the Greater Victoria area, which are those of the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Sqwa Nations, where I've been so grateful to be safe here over the last year in particular, but over the last 25 years where I've called this home as a guest, and just really appreciate the beautiful territory and the stewardship of the lands. We want to begin also by acknowledging that there's a lot going on in our world today, a lot of hurt, a lot of pain, and the discovery of the 215 children at Tecumloops has been sitting heavy with so many of us as we navigate what that means and how we process that and how we move forward in better ways and put reconciliation at the center of how we all work together and live together. I also want to recognize the Islamophobia that we saw this week in London, Ontario, and just the difficulties of us each navigating what racism looks like in Canada and how we surface that and move forward. So with that, I want to center us with a reading from Richard Waganise's book, Embers. For those of you that have joined us on a few sessions, you'll know that he's one of my favorite authors, and I just take great solace in how his words show up and how they support me as I navigate some of these difficult, challenging times. So, a reading for today. For you today, my friends, I raise sacred smoke. For you who are troubled, confused, doubtful, lonely, afraid, addicted, unwell, bothered, or alone, I raise sacred smoke. For those of you in sorrow, grief, or pain, I raise sacred smoke. For those who work for people, for change, for spiritual evolution, for the upward and outward growth of our common humanity and the well-being of our planet, I raise sacred smoke. For those of you in joy, in the glow of small or great triumphs, who live in love, faith, courage, and respect, I raise sacred smoke. And in fact, in the act of all of this, I raise it also for myself. So hopefully that gives us a place to start the conversation today. And I want to begin by really welcoming Lara and Darrell into the space and just acknowledging and appreciating who they each are and how they show up and really support so much great work in the world. So to introduce Darrell, Darrell is the younger brother of Terry Fox, for whom the Terry Fox Foundation and the Terry Fox Research Institute are named. In 1980, at the age of 17, Darrell joined Terry as he made his marathon of hope across Canada. As Terry's younger brother, Darrell has a long history of involvement in the legacy founded on his brother's name, and has made incredible contributions through that work to cancer research and to raising the profile of Terry and the importance of that work across Canada. To date, the foundation has raised over $750 million for cancer research worldwide. Darrell serves on the Terry Fox Research Institute Board of Directors and is a senior advisor for the Institute. We'll hear more about Darrell in just a moment. Chief Lara Mussell Savage, who I've had the opportunity to work with for a number of years, comes from the Sqwa Nation and is a dedicated athlete. Lara is passionate about Indigenous sport and youth development. In 2005, Lara was awarded Canada's National Tom Longboat Award, Leadership Award, and was the first female Indigenous athlete of the year. Lara works with the Indigenous Sport, Physical Activity and Recreation Council, which is where I've had the opportunity to work with her. She also served on the Vancouver Organizing Committee for the Olympic and Paralympic Games in 2010, and is an incredible advocate for sport, physical activity, and brings passion and commitment to everything that she does. She's also inducted into the Chilliwack Sport Hall of Fame and is an ambassador for the Level the Field campaign that promotes gender equity in sport. So I'm going to turn it over to Lara to give us a little bit more of an introduction about herself and her work.
Thank you. Thanks, Andrea Acewell. It's a real pleasure to be here for this episode, and I'm coming to you all today from my Stalo ancestors. I am, as you said, a member of the Sqwa First Nation. We are members of the Puyallup tribes out here in the Fraser Valley, situated along the Hope River in Chilliwack. And our communities are within Soltamuk in the Stalo territory here in the Fraser Valley. So that's where I'm coming from today, and honored to be doing so. So a little bit more about me. I'm a mother and a wife and a daughter and a sister, and have had my entire life a real passion for sport and physical activity. So I had a real great fortune of having a mother and a father who were fantastic role models when it came to sport. I got into sports at a young age, whether it was gymnastics or swimming, even curling, softball, basketball. I grew to love both individual sports and team sports. And had the opportunity to be introduced to the sport of ultimate frisbee in my grade 12 year at high school. I was at University Hill Secondary in Vancouver on the UBC campus. And at the time, the BC Disc Sports Society had an outreach program for some of the high schools to bring the sport of ultimate frisbee. And so it was relatively still very new to people. Lots of people hadn't heard of the sport at that time. And a core of us in my grade 12 year, we were fascinated by the sport. And so really got into ultimate frisbee. Our high school formed a team. We played in the first annual BC Ultimate Championships, which had, probably about a dozen teams, which now you'll see over 200 teams participating in that event these days. And our high school team wound up entering, after the summertime came and school was over, we entered our team into the Vancouver Ultimate League, and it kind of grew from there. And so I ended up playing competitive ultimate and had the opportunity to be a part of Team Canada in the women's division for 4 world championships, winning 2 gold and 2 bronze in those 4 events. So sport has long been a passion of mine on the field. Off the field, I wanted it to be part of my career as well. And so went to UBC and graduated with a Bachelor of Kinesiology, but minored in commerce and took the specialization stream, which was the sport management side. And I've been working in sport ever since. And so just, obviously a real passion for sport. And along the way, recognize the importance of giving back to my First Nation community, which has long supported me in my journey. So when I returned back to living in the community approximately 12 years ago, realized that I wanted to do as much as I could to give back. And so I did run for council. And so for the last 7 years have been on council for Sqwa First Nation as an elected councillor. And then just this past fall, allowed my name to stand for nomination for chief, and then was elected this past November. So that's a new leadership position for me to take on, as well as working with iSpark. That's been 10 years now with the Indigenous Sport and Physical Activity and Recreation Council as Director of Sport. So I've got kind of that balance of contributing as a sport leader, and then also as a leader within my community. And so lots on the go for sure, and trying to navigate through some very unique challenges at this time. That's a bit about me.
Beautiful. Thank you for kicking us off with sharing a bit more. And I mean, I can only imagine what your schedule looks like, basically juggling 2 full-time jobs that are both very demanding in the middle of a pandemic and all of the pieces. So we're looking forward to hearing a bit more about how those journeys have gone for you. So I'm going to turn it over to Darrell for you to do a little bit more of an introduction of yourself, Darrell. And we were saying it just before we started. So nice to see you. We got to work together about 15 years ago, I think, on the 25th anniversary of Terry's journey. And so this is a lovely reconnection.
It's been a while, Andrea. So yes, it's been great to reconnect, and it's actually been 16 years. But that was a pretty momentous occasion for us. It was the 25th anniversary, and it was incredibly successful. It was when we introduced the National School Run Day across the country, and over 10,000 schools hosted Terry Fox events, and we took fundraising to a new level, raising close to $50 million that year during the 25th anniversary. So as I shared with you, Andrea, this is really awkward and uncomfortable for me because you've asked me to speak about myself. And that's not my role, I don't think. When you, with the brief introduction you gave, you said Terry Fox's brother, and that's how I see myself. That is my role, that is my identity. I'm very comfortable with it. But I'll try and expand and a little bit more on who I am. And I also, before I begin, would like to just say how much I appreciate being with Lara as well. She's almost a neighbor. I'm in the Stolo territory as well. I'm in Chilliwack. I love it here. This has been my home for 16 years as well. And I'm never going anywhere else. It's just the right place. And not only in light of what it offers, from athletic perspective, I have a lot in common with Lara there. I love sports and have an incredible fetish for it. But I also like this community in terms of the First Nations piece that it offers. And, we recently have become more aware of our Métis heritage, and perhaps we'll touch on that later. So that's something that I found rather late in life, but I'm trying to embrace and engage in what it offers, and that's extremely exciting. But just a little bit about me. I don't like this sort of position. I'll say it again. I consider myself an introvert, so to be here speaking is quite uncomfortable, and that's how I grew up. Really, I was never that comfortable within the school environment, the social part of it. But I think what helped with me was having sports. I played all kinds of sports, like Lara team sports was big. Basketball, soccer were big for me. So I was able to find my way through the social piece by having that opportunity to engage with my teammates. And then this incredible opportunity arrived at the age of 17. I was 1 month away from graduating from high school, and the Marathon of Hope surfaced. Terry had been running for 6 weeks, and things weren't going so well in terms of the dynamics between Terry and Doug. And Doug was Terry's best friend who drove the van during the Marathon of Hope, and it was quickly concluded that if someone else didn't join, there might be a murder on the Marathon of Hope. So I put up my hand and was happy to leave school a month early and become a part of the Marathon of Hope experience. And it was obviously an incredible opportunity to witness history in the making. I was able to witness Terry Fox run a marathon every day on an artificial leg. And here I am 41 years later, still sharing that story. And I'm quivering a little bit here because it's always an emotional story because of what I witnessed and the gift I was given. But it also came with some unusual challenges in terms of having to carry this responsibility and burden, and it wasn't one that I was comfortable with initially. So I, after the Marathon of Hope ended, there was a gap of a decade where I was not actively involved with Terry's vision and dream, and that's because I had to become comfortable with who I was before I could be comfortable being Terry Fox's brother, and it took a decade. And my thanks will always be to my mom and dad, who were there right from the very beginning. Mom was just a card shop manager, and she assumed this role of carrying Terry's legacy forward after he passed away. And And so that's what that's been my role for 31 years now is, I'm senior advisor at the Terry Fox Research Institute. I'm a member of the Terry Fox Foundation, and Rob Reed is here. I have to say I'm also a director of the Terry Fox Center, which is responsible for the Terry Fox collection. I don't live in the past, but I go back there every day, and I feel this gift of being able to speak about Terry every day is something that I'll never take for granted. And it still resonates, and I think it will forevermore. So I feel incredibly honored to be here and to be able to talk a little bit more about Terry during the next few minutes as well. Thank you.
We're gonna make you talk about you a little bit too, Darrell, but I appreciate that. I think for so many of us, and this was kind of the interesting journey as we started these conversations just over a year ago, is that as leaders, we often are talking about our role or the organizations we represent, but we don't often talk about ourselves. And so there's such a richness in getting to learn a little bit more about each other. And so I so appreciate both of you coming on today and all of the guests we've had over the last year, and particularly when it's not a place of comfort to talk about yourself, that vulnerability and how that shows up. So thank you for that. And Lara, I'm going to come back to you and talk about sort of a little bit about your journey of belonging and how maybe a bit of a time when you didn't belong, and then sort of a time when you felt like you did belong, and kind of starting there in this conversation today. And I know you've touched a little bit on some of that already, but just kind of walking us through that.
Yeah, journey of belonging. In thinking about the question of a time when I felt like I belonged, what immediately comes to mind is actually what may seem like just such a simple example, but it was when I was new to competitive ultimate, and I tried out for a competitive touring elite team of women. And it was my first time trying to venture into competitive ultimate. I'd been playing recreational ultimate. I'd done the high school thing and was now really wanting to try to enter into the competitive stream. And I did end up making this team. It was like a B team of women. And we had plays. There were different plays used, right? Like different strategies out on the field. And they needed names. These plays, some of them needed names. We were going to be using them all season. And we were invited as team members to be creative and think of some names of plays. And, I'm a rookie, I'm a newbie. I was one of the youngest players on the team. I wasn't really yes, I had made the team, but I hadn't really had that sense of belonging just yet. And I had come up with this name for a play. The women loved it. They ended up using it. And it was that simple. It just being invited to contribute, sharing an idea, feeling comfortable to be able to do so, because I was so shy. I'm an introvert. So just in that environment, it was just scary enough being at practice with these women who were very experienced. I was the newer rookie, younger player. And that did a ton for my self-esteem, and it really helped me feel like I belonged, because they listened to my idea, they took my idea, they liked it, they implemented it, and it was that simple, was being invited to name a play, to name a strategy, a play that we were using out on the field. And so that resonates with me enough that, I try to be conscious of that in my work and in my relationships today, is giving that space for a voice and for ideas. And, they may not always be good ones or ones that you use, but, even just acknowledging the strength that comes from that idea, or, appreciating that person for bringing it forward, or, even if it's something that gets parked for later, it's that simple. So that, when thinking about belonging, that's the one that actually comes up to my mind first, was because it had such an impact on me. It just gave me so much confidence. And then, I wind up becoming later, a captain on on the A team, and then, you know, Team Canada, and those kinds of things matter. So just, you know, a strengths-based approach to our work and our leadership. You know, even in the captaincy system that we used in Ultimate Frisbee, because there was in the 2000 kind of era, there weren't a lot of elite level coaches per se. We were a group of captains of 5 of us who led the team. So we were player coaches, really. We were coaching and playing the team. So we were coming up with the strategies, but out of the 5 of us, it was very much a strength-based approach. You know, some of us had different strengths. So we had a captain who was designated for talking in the huddles when we really needed some motivation and some strategy. We had a voice for that. When we needed a bit of a kick in the pants and we needed somebody to actually get a little bit angry and get that grr going, we had another captain for that. You know, when we needed to do line calling and being strategic about, you know, what we were putting out on the field for offensive or defensive strategies, and we were using, you know, another captain for that. And so I feel like that real simple example of just having a voice and being heard has really actually formulated what ended up being a leadership style that I developed later on. So the strength-based approach, and so that for me contributes to you know, a time where I felt like I belong, that ended up translating into some really profound and bigger contributions to my leadership style. Do you want me to go into a time where I didn't belong, or can we ask Darrell for his example of?
Yeah, why don't we flip to Darrell, and then we'll come back. But I just wanted to kind of echo that. I'm going to call it kind of co-creation approach, and like bringing and sharing each voice on your team in that situation to really kind of give you that space to really feel like you were connected and contributing. And for me, it sort of comes up around when we talk about like sovereignty and like the opportunity for folks to drive their own futures and what that can mean in our country and the times we're in as well. It kind of echoes for me. So I don't know if that's a little broader than you wanted to go with that, but it sort of was resonating in my head. So I thought I'd share. Darrell, how about you? Tell us, we'll start with the time you felt like you belonged, and then we'll maybe go back to not belonging.
Okay, great. Well, guess what? I'm going to talk about the Marathon of Hope and my arrival on the scene, May 31st, 1980. You know, I was asked to join with Terry because by default, no one else was available. So I won that opportunity. And I quickly looked at my resume. I didn't have one. I looked at the skills that I developed to the age of 17, nothing there. So I realized I had one thing going for me, and that was this a bit of a sense of humor. I was, you know, I was able to make Terry laugh. I've lost it since. So if you've seen it, please pass my sense of humor along. But I realized that that's something I had to offer. So, you know, I at least I was wise enough to know not to rock any boats when I arrived that first day. There was just Doug Allward who was there, and then also a representative from the Canadian Cancer Society. And, you know, one thing about, I mean, I think Terry, and there's so many things we talk about Terry, but he was very inclusive. You know, he didn't ask for $100, $1,000, $1 million. He asked for $1 from every Canadian. So his vision was very inclusive. So right from the get-go, I felt welcomed and part of the team, in light of the fact, as I just shared, I didn't have much to offer. And that was what I experienced throughout the Marathon of Hope, as the entourage expanded, as the momentum for the Marathon of Hope increased. That feeling of belonging and being inclusive was always there. We were one, you know, we lacked any sort of organization. It's incredible when you look back on the Marathon of Hope. There was no branding. You know, Terry didn't arrive with a Marathon of Hope t-shirt. He was given one, and that's the t-shirt he wore. There was no shorts or socks. These are things that he had to find on his own. There was very little organization, but yet as a team and this sense of being inclusive and part of something bigger than the individual parts was very evident right from day one. So and it just continued to grow, and it didn't matter how big the entourage became, it was still a very tight-knit group, because we all were on side with what Terry was attempting to do, and it was quite easy to to defer to him, and through very challenging times, to say the least, getting up every morning at 4:30 and running 42K every day. And as things progressed for the Marathon of Hope, there were also the need to engage with Canadians, to speak. And he found a way to find the energy and time to attend those events. So here I am. Terry's my standard, is my benchmark. Whenever I feel like I'm having a difficult day, I just reflect back to Terry. And so that feeling of belonging has always been there, thanks to Terry and this group that continues to support cancer research in the name of the Terry Fox Foundation 40 years later.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Do you want to lead from there into sort of the concept of not belonging and like what that looked and how that showed up for you? You spoke a little bit about sort of your time not contributing to the Terry Fox Foundation and research, but was that sort of the time, or tell us about it? I won't preconceive anything.
Yeah, that was a difficult period for me. It was dealing with the loss of someone who was, more than my brother. I guess for me, I saw Terry as being invincible, that he could, even up to the last day, I thought he would bounce back and continue the Marathon of Hope. So that was a real struggle for me for those years, and I'll never get them back. And sometimes have difficulty with that, accepting that those were lost years, and I had no sense of belonging to anything, to be honest. So, but I found my way through it, the darkness, and it was dark. I have Terry to thank, and a family to thank for that, for getting me through those dark days, and it was, the being able to recognize who I was, I think, was important, and it took time to understand what I could offer, that there was something there, that I could make a contribution, that I did belong. So I'm thankful for that. I'm glad I didn't, it would have been a really big mistake if I had jumped on right away. And I'm glad there was time, and those, my mom gave me that time to figure it all out. And in 1990, when an opportunity presented itself, I accepted it, and I was ready, because I knew what I could offer. I knew I'm not Terry, and I never will be. But there is something that I could offer, and one thing I think we have is within our family is the never give up gene. We always try really hard. We're hard workers, and I knew I had that going for me. And I've enjoyed the journey and the road, and I feel like I belong now.
Thank you so much for that. And so that time away, as hard as that sounds like it was, seems like it's been so important to your journey and finding your way forward. Lara, how about you? Time you didn't belong.
Yeah, this one, I would be remiss in not sharing the example connected back to racism, like just experiencing even from a young age. So I don't appear. I'm of mixed ancestry. So I have On my mother's side, Belgian and British roots. And so I don't visibly appear to be of First Nations ancestry, which I think has made for some interesting experiences where people who may not realize who I am and where I come from, and maybe assume, making assumptions, and so then maybe feel freer to express their viewpoints or make offhanded remarks or comments or even racist remarks without realizing who I am. So maybe if I did appear visibly as an Indigenous person, that maybe they wouldn't have said those things, possibly, right? So there's been that kind of interesting experience. So even at a young age, in school, and hearing another student, I was like grade 4, so I was probably like 10 years old, make a racist remark about the Indians, and I had grown up on reserve and surrounded by all my relatives, and so to have something like that in your class of peers really stung, and it made me start questioning: should I be ashamed of my family? Should I be ashamed of who I am and where I come from? That doesn't feel right to me. I feel pretty good about where I come from and who I am, but it began with things like that, of not always feeling like you belong in those kinds of environments when those things happen. Even just, my Bannock days, I spent 5 years with that organizing committee and working in Indigenous participation. So working together with the Four Host First Nation Society, looking to maximize opportunities for Indigenous participation in the games, from procurement opportunities and contracts, volunteering, to cultural opportunities, sport opportunities. So it was, early days in a meeting with a group of people, people in the room, I don't think they realized that I was, an Indigenous person in the room. And there was just this casual conversation that began about Indigenous Olympians. And in 1904, in those Olympic Games, there was a contingent, a whole team of Mohawk members who made up a Canadian lacrosse team. And they had their traditional names, although anglicized, but it would have been, names as like Almighty Voice and Nighthawk and Half Moon. I believe those are some of the names of some of the players on that contingent that went to the Olympic Games. And there were a couple of people in the meeting making fun of those names and laughing at the names of these Mohawk Olympians. And somebody then, gave the nudge and then kind of, pointed down at the end of the meeting room table, like, there's an Indigenous person in the room. So it just made for this very awkward and uncomfortable moment, because they then immediately I think they felt shame and guilt having said that in front of me, even though there should have been, I think, no matter who was in the room, it was inappropriate. But for me personally, it just all of a sudden now it was like I was the person in the room that, everyone wanted to see my reaction to that particular moment and how I was going to respond. And so hard to feel like you belong when, moments like that arise, kind of no one, being that ally and saying something before I even have to. It just, so what contributed to this feeling of not belonging was just these blatant remarks or making fun of Indigenous people without maybe realizing what they were doing. I do try to take opportunities where I can to have those conversations with people, even with the recent spotlight that has been put on of the legacy of and impact of residential schools with this announcement of the Kamloops findings, which comes honestly to no surprise to our communities. We have many members from my nation alone here at Sqwa who were shipped off to Kamloops Residential School. why were Chilliwack kids getting sent to Kamloops residential school? Well, because it was far away, because then that just further severed ties between our community's children and their parents, right? So so it's reopened, a lot of wounds, and I've had a lot of my non-Indigenous friends reaching out, and I'm having some really amazing conversations with them. They're asking, for recommended readings. It's more than just wanting to share their thoughts and prayers. They really do want to take action and to learn more, to be, they just feeling like they want to be more of an ally. And so I welcome those opportunities, of course, and having those conversations. But, in a sense of belonging, I think we all need to be open to diverse cultures and what you can learn. Like, the Indigenous people aren't the only, communities that have just interesting names. They're just different names. You find that in any origin, you can find interesting names. So yeah, that's my example, is just experiencing, I think, and that I have many where I've been, say in a meeting room, people don't realize that I am a person who's of Indigenous ancestry. And for some reason, that I don't know if that means they feel freer, right? As opposed to if I had been visibly a First Nation individual, that maybe they wouldn't have said those things. I don't know, but that's definitely contributed to not feeling like I belong, starting at a young age to question, do I need to feel ashamed of who I am? And of course I don't, and I haven't, but I questioned it, seeing my peers as a child, making remarks, and then continuing that as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, was my example.
Yeah, so many pieces within that example. Thank you so much, Lara. And I can only imagine how many reach outs you've had, and sort of having to support others to be educated when they need to take some of the time to educate themselves, but also appreciating kind of the opportunity that we have in history right now, where people are showing up with more curiosity, I would say, to learn. And we saw that in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2015, where sort of this was like this awareness building. And it's like, how do we take those opportunities but not have the burden of that fall on Indigenous people, because shouldn't be your job or their job to educate. Everyone has to do the work, and non-Indigenous people need to show up and do the work twice as hard, at least, because we haven't done the work to date. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Darrell, I would love to hear a little bit about your journey in discovering your Métis heritage and kind of exploring what that looks like for you, and how that's contributed to places of belonging for you within that journey.
I'd be happy to. I can't attest to this being there during my early years. In fact, it's something we found rather late, and I have a couple of cousins to the east of me to thank for that. And it comes from stigma. My mom's mom, Marion Gladue, who was born in Turtle Mountain, North Dakota, on a reserve, was never comfortable speaking about her history. Her ancestors fled the Red River during the rebellion, and that's where they ended up. And then they slowly migrated up back to Southwest Manitoba when it was safe. And what's so fascinating, I think, for me about my grandma's heritage is just how an incredible part of our family she was. I don't know how many grandchildren. I think there's 40, but I could confirm she was at every wedding, at every birth. When Terry was sick, she was out here for significant periods of time. She was the glue that kept our family together. And I was quite close to her. I was fortunate to speak and at her funeral. I gave the eulogy on behalf of the grandchildren. Whenever I was traveling on behalf of the Terry Fox Foundation and I found myself in Winnipeg, I always had to add an extra night so I can go and see my grandma and spend a night in her smoke-filled room. She smoked like a chimney. But we never discussed it because, again, she just wasn't comfortable. So, after she had passed away, the grandchildren started to communicate, and we started to explore again, thanks to cousins east of here. And I'm fascinated by, our history and our heritage, and I'm coming to it late. So there is that sense of I don't really feel I deserve to belong, because I don't, because I grew up in a working class family in a suburb of, Vancouver, and so I'm finding it late. But I think there's so many similarities in who Terry was and the First Nations history. We were buffalo hunters. That's what our ancestors did. And isn't it amazing that Terry decided to traverse and run across the country? I don't think it's a coincidence that Terry passed away on my grandma's birthday. There was something more there. What was also interesting was that my grandma passed away one day post 9/11. The Terry Fox run was taking place that weekend. So we were called as a family, all, from Manitoba east, or west, I'm sorry, to small town Melita, Manitoba, on the day of the Terry Fox run for my grandma's funeral. So again, more than just a coincidence. I look forward to feeling a sense of belonging. I know that, I've been engaging and communicating with Metis Nation BC, and they've been very helpful in helping with our history, and it's a wonderful identity because there's some incredible people within it. I'm somehow more obviously touched by, the news of Kamloops, and, I'm struggling with that. And, as Lara mentioned, this is not new news. And I'm frustrated that there's, we're all reacting to it, but what's the action? What's going to come out of this real and tangible that's going to really make change going forward? I don't want to see words. I'm looking for action. So I'm hopeful that really happens from this, because, I know there's not only the Kamloops residential schools, there's so many across this country, and there's so many unmarked graves that need to be dealt with quickly, really quickly. And there's no question of how many dollars are at play here. It should be done.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And, given that we're in Indigenous History Month in June, and the opportunity of people being able to explore, we will share out some resources in the follow-up from today of some suggested reading and tools for those that are joining us on the call to start to take that exploration, including the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action, because those are 94 powerful examples of how we can take some action and start to move this work forward. So thank you for sharing that journey of kind of your grandma and your Métis history, Darrell, and just thinking what that will bring for you as you go forward and explore that. Lara, I want to come back to you, and being the elected chief in your community and leading Indigenous athletes through your work at iSpark, how do you surface belonging in each of those roles, and for the people that you're serving, supporting, advocating on behalf of? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, thanks. I know with our work at iSpark, one of the real important things that we strive towards is ensuring that programs are community driven. I mean, often you may see an outside organization coming to do work for an Indigenous community, rather than with an Indigenous community. And so it's just really important in doing that kind of work to allow for that space, the voice of the community to be a driving force in how community programs are designed and delivered. From different protocols to even the time of day or the season to how often. It's important to ensure there's consideration for building capacity within the organization to build those leaders to take on the program leadership themselves. So, if it's a basketball camp, rather than having an outside basketball organization come in, do the program and go, that you're actually ensuring the program is designed together in collaboration with the community. And there may be some unique components that the community comes up with as part of that program design and delivery that the organization has maybe never done before, and it could be enriching the program, but then also keeping in mind the sustainability piece. But connection is so important. So one of the evaluation tools that we've piloted and that we use in particularly in the CUSP program that we do with BC Ultimate, they've adopted this practice. It's called the Head, Heart, Feet, Spirit tool. So it's gathering in a circle. And it's just giving the kids the 4 questions, or your program participants just 4 questions. So the head question is, tell me something you learned today. The heart question is, tell me how you felt about today, one thing that you felt about today. The feet question is, tell me something you're going to do once you walk away from today. What are you going to do with what you learned today? And then the final one, the spirit question, is really just about the connection. It doesn't necessarily have to be something very deep on a spiritual level, because sometimes that's just as simple as, did you make a connection today with another person? It could be, it felt great to have a high five when I made a great pass to, my friend Joey over here, right? Like, it's just about that connection piece, something that's maybe bigger than yourself. Maybe you had, a family member who was there cheering you on. Maybe you had a great interaction with your coach in it. But it's giving an opportunity for that kind of sharing. And so I think having opportunities for building those types of connections amongst the kids or your program participants, right, is an important part as well. So I think those are the kinds of things we keep in mind, is ensuring that it's community driven, allowing for participants in the community to have a voice in leading program design and delivery. And I love the Head, Heart, Feet, Spirit tool for evaluating at the end as well. So that came from I think it's the Center for Excellence in Youth Engagement, had the Head, Heart, Feet part, and then it was after a session, I believe, or a workshop, the Indigenous voices said, wouldn't it be great to have the spirit component aligning more with the medicine wheel or a holistic approach, and not forgetting that spirit component and connection.
Beautiful. I love that so much. I would love to be able to share that out as kind of a key learning from today, because I think that's such a powerful way to think about how we show up in the world, how we're looking at programs, services. And I was going to definitely say that, all of that resonates so strongly with the medicine wheel and the holistic pieces that we've done so much work together around. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I also wanted to echo sort of that for versus with piece. And that was certainly one of my early learnings from yourself and Rick Brandt and Alwyn Morris, in terms of like, how do we do with and learn from each other and come together in that opportunity to share. And such a powerful piece of how we co-create a better world together, let alone programming together.
Yeah, Andrea, I think a good example of of the long-term athlete development model, and there were workshops, being held across Canada to have the conversation about an Indigenous long-term, an LTAD, an Indigenous long-term athlete development model. And I was there for a few of those and remember some of that messaging being that not everyone sees themselves as an athlete, that there are some Indigenous cultures, particularly up north with Inuit culture, where competition is not the be all and end all. It's really about, your personal best and, cheering on your opponents. And, you've kind of won if, you're achieving your personal best, that like the podiums and the medals culturally weren't as significant as say maybe in other cultures. And it ended up, the name of it became long-term participant development model. And so I don't know, Andrew, if that came from those workshops and that renaming, but I'd like to think that they did, because it really was something that resonated strongly from those sessions was, well, if we're talking long-term development, is it always about athletes, and is that the right word? And it became participants. So I think that's an example of just, allowing for that working with. And then it became something so enriched, I think, by just changing that one word. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That came from the voices that we heard was across the country. I mean, there was so much of that work that was, as you say, kind of co-created and through those conversations with, to understand, like, what does this need to look like for the people that it's going to ultimately support and serve and connect as we go forward. Amazing. Darrell, what about you in terms of the work you do with all of the various pieces of Terry's legacy and how you use that as a kind of a platform to, I'm going to say, kind of connect Canadians in many ways, and probably broader than Canadians, but just thinking about, like, how does belonging show up in that work, and how do you see that?
Well, it's interesting just hearing Lara talk about, the podium and medals, and, and how that isn't very much a focus of, the Indigenous community. I mean, I guess that's where Terry surfaces again in terms of his values, and treating, every dollar as if it's the $1 that's going to finally end the suffering that cancer causes. Every dollar is important. And this is something as a family that we really hang on to, Terry's values. It wasn't simply about running across the country to raise money for cancer research. That was very much what Terry wanted, but it's how he did it. And we're very protective of those values. And we talk about belonging. It's a challenge for us as a family, when there are opportunities to raise more money, but it comes at the cost of Terry's inclusive values. And we're in the process now of, some of us are becoming old and dated, so there's a need for us to mentor, and there is the next generation of Foxes, our children, who are now taking on leadership roles and membership roles within the three Terry Fox identities. And that's what we feel is very important to us going forward, is maintaining those inclusive values, that unless we can recognize every person who gives, we won't recognize those that just give more, because the ability to give more. And that flies against how all others fundraise. And I think that's something that is really unique to us and the Terry Fox Foundation. But it's not easy. It's really hard. But guess what? So it's running 42K every day on our official leg. So we believe it can be done. And I think after 41 years, and actually the total funds raised is 850 million. I think we've shown that it does work. But we're always the membership is always, that is, the family is always up against it in terms of those very close to the foundation, and including boards that feel there are opportunities. And if we swayed, if we open the door, but it's a slippery slope. And once that door opens, you lose what I think is very important to the Terry Fox brand for lack of a better word. That's what we are. And we're gonna maintain those values because we think they're important. I think we should be, personally, I think we should be leading with them more instead of hiding them, because in today's world, they are needed. They are needed. And I think this is a time for Terry Fox to shine, because it's about thinking about others and not self. And that's where Terry stood very prominently.
Yeah, values are absolutely resonate so strongly with me, Darrell, and with what I believe the world needs to lead with generally right now. Like, how do we show up for each other, and how do we lead with the values that are important to us and connect with others through that? So thank you for sharing that. So we're getting really close to the end of our hour together. These hours always fly by. I'd love to open it up for each of you to sort of do a closing comment, a last piece that you want to share with our audience around your journey, around what you want for the world as we go forward. What resonates for you? Who would like to lead us off?
I don't mind. One of the things I wanted to be sure to mention today around belonging is the teachings that we have in Stalo. So our language, our traditional language is called Halkamelem. And within our Halkamelem guiding principles includes recognition of Sqwa, and that's the life spirit. It's recognizing the sacred life spirit that is not only within us as humans, but in the land and nature that surrounds us too. So it's in the animals, it's in the water and the plants, it's in the land, and how valuable that kind of teaching, understanding this sacred life spirit that resonates within all of us, that it connects us all. And that often when you will hear, maybe an Indigenous leader or elder ending a prayer or a blessing with the words, all my relations, that's talking about not just my relatives, my cousins and my aunties. We're talking about, that's the recognition of us being connected through that Sqwa as people and to the land. And so I think that that's just so important in considering belonging is not just necessarily feeling like you belong in terms of the people you're with. It can also be that sense of belonging to where you are and to the place that you're in and to that space and to the animals and the plants and the land as well. And so I did want to kind of end with acknowledging Sqwa, that sacred life spirit, as part of the Halkamelem guiding principles that are within my teachings in my family and in my culture, and how that relates to belonging. So I wanted to end that here, and just grateful to have been here with you all today. Thanks, Andrea.
Thanks so much, Lara. And what a beautiful piece to leave us with. And I need to do some readings on that and learn a bit more, because that just sounds like such a powerful way to anchor ourselves as we go forward. Darrell, how about you? Last words, wrap up, thoughts?
Well, I won't be able to follow what Lara shared there. Yes, I'd like to read those readings too, but I don't know. My thinking is that belonging is a journey, and it's lifelong, and I'm still on it, and I'm still trying to belong, and it's something to constantly strive for, whether it's within and within those very close to you or outside. And it's mostly with the outside. I still think I have some work to do, as long as you recognize that you're not quite there and there's more to learn, which is what life's all about, then you will continue to move forward and continue to belong as you get older and age.
Thank you for that, Darrell. And as one of my favorite authors says, belonging is about belonging to yourself first. And so I just really appreciate that sort of navigating the journey and figuring out who you are and how you show up in the world, and what an opportunity that is. I want to thank both of you so much for being here today and for sharing your stories and being vulnerable with us. I know coming into today, sort of the extra heaviness that many of us are carrying probably made it a tougher conversation for you to enter, but I just really appreciate you showing up, and I value both of you so much and the work you're each doing. So it was just such a pleasure to have this time with you. So thank you. I do want to also acknowledge and thank those that attended today, and our next Bridges of Belonging session is coming up on July 13th, and will feature Paralympian Ness Murby, who is a trans athlete and will be competing in Tokyo later this summer. So we'll have a second guest to be announced as we go forward, but just wanted to share that with folks. And again, huge thank you to both Lara and Darrell for being here and for showing up the way you did. And for everyone that's here, take care, stay safe, and be well.
Thanks all. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thank you.